Hey YouTube, hi, my name is Mark. This is Nixon Motorsports. Hey, this channel is all about motorsports, from racing to exotic cars and even simulators. Today's video, we're going to talk about chains and sprockets for motorcycle powered race cars. Alright, well, let's get with it. So chains and sprockets, you know, it doesn't sound like the most exciting topic, but it's an important one, and I suspect you racers out there with motorcycle powered race cars probably understand and agree with that. For reliability reasons, not necessarily performance, but the right setup, the right chain, the right sprockets, and so on are actually important for just general reliability, to make sure you actually finish the race and so on. Make sense? So let me talk about my, let's just say, experience, right, of chain and sprockets with my Formula 1000 race car here. So let me just spend a few minutes talking about that. So I, like many racers, try different things all the time, and for the purpose of performance usually. Reliability, of course, comes into play, but I started out with this race car with the original, let's start with sprockets, with the original sprockets that were on the race car, and the front counter sprocket was the typical. In fact, let me pan down here to show you some. So here's a handful of counter sprockets for a race car, and here's a rear drive sprocket. But the race car came with split rear drive sprockets. So if I point down to this sprocket here, basically the sprocket's cut in half, and the reason a lot of guys do that, or at least my expectation, you know, it provides quick, easy access for gear change. If you think about motorcycle-powered race cars, the only gearing option you have is the final drive. So the counter sprocket, the drive sprocket, those that ratio, those number of teeth, is really all you have. Very few racers will actually get into the gearbox and make you know, gearing changes there. So a big focus on the sprockets themselves, the final drive sprockets. So a lot of people do that with the split sprocket. Now, for myself, I had issues. So if you think about, let's go down here to the race car for a second. If you think about it, the alignment, if you will, right, from the rear drive sprocket to your counter sprocket, the amount of, in fact, if I look at it this way, right, the amount of deviation from true center that you have. So if one sprocket is not aligned with the counter or the other side of the sprocket assembly, your chain's going to bind a little bit. It's going to prematurely wear. The sprocket's going to prematurely wear, and so on, right? So with the split sprockets, I found I had issues occasionally, actually frequently, where the sprocket, the drive sprocket, would actually just slightly move, and the matching half or the other side wouldn't track necessarily exactly at the same. So whether it's a little side to side small movement or whatever it is, right, that small change created an issue for the chain itself. And so I wore through my rear drive sprockets relatively quickly because they were split. So the next item, or following actually that with the drive sprocket, I'll talk about some tips here in a minute. But one of those is actually a solid sprocket in the rear, and for that purpose, it eliminates any misalignment at least from the sprocket itself. You still have to pay attention to the alignment, the kind of the true center between both sprocket sides, but that's a big improvement. So, what else did I try over the last several years? My first thought was, you know what? Because I heard a few other people doing it. You know, let's try different chain, not just the manufacturer, but different chain weights, right, or pitch, if you want to call it that. So the 1K liter or the 1 liter motor engines, like I use the ZX10R, they come factory with a 525 chain for street use. And initially I ran a 525 chain. I tried multiple different chain manufacturers, you know, DID, you know, RK, and so on. And for the reason of performance, I tried even a 520 chain. I thought, you know, my logic was, look, I only need to get the race car to finish a race, and if a chain provides a little bit of performance, now initially you might think, okay, well that's stupid, but you could save about a pound on the chain weight itself. That's a lot of rotating mass, right? You know, that would impact acceleration and so on. And so my thinking was, and again, listening to a few others trying this as well, you know what, I'm gonna have some sprockets made, I'm gonna try the 520 stuff and so on. I did, I ran a few different races with that. I will say I was constantly chasing my tail. The chain would stretch, you know, a lot, you know, so constantly changing chains between races, between practices, and so on. So I'd always be screwing around with the chain itself and replacing it and, you know, tightening it, constantly adjusting it, and so on. So I never had a failure with that, but I do know of others who have. So I made the decision, you know what, chasing my tail for that little extra performance possibly for the chain just doesn't make any sense. And I had a lot of premature wear on the sprocket assemblies, and it was just a mess. So I made the decision to go with a 530 chain and stay with a 530 chain, and I have ever since. And the what's worked for me is the right chain's important. So we'll talk about chains here just a second and different chains you might want to look at. But let me pan down here. So the one thing that I did that has been fantastic ever since, and I've never changed, is I had custom sprockets made from Sprocket Specialties. And here's my front set of counter sprockets, and these are all solid steel in 530. And then I had a handful of custom drive sprockets made, and these are, as you can tell, they're a one-piece sprocket, and they will design it based on your differential, all your specs that you need, of course. But what I did, and actually it was their recommendation too, not just a single one-piece sprocket, but I had them shipped out. They were hardened and then anodized as well. And ever since I've done that, and of course the 530 chain makes a difference here too, but my sprockets have been rock solid. I have sprockets that I've been running for the last couple years, multiple races on them. They don't show any signs of wearing, which is you know, a nice thing to have, of course, right? Yeah, so I would, again, first tip, first recommendation here, to be really clear, I recommend a solid rear drive sprocket. Have these things hardened and anodized, or at least hardened, whatever that process is. That will save you a lot of grief and issues with your sprockets themselves. All right, so now let's shift to the chains themselves. And I tried multiple chains over the years. I ended up with, and I use exclusively now, the RK chain. Let me just pan down here and I'll show you what I use. So I use the 530 ZXW. Now this is the XW ring chain itself. And here you can see, well, it's in the wrapping so you can't see it very well. Here's one out that's old, used, dirty thing, but you can kind of get an idea what this is. Now these are rivet style chains. So here's a master link here in the wrapping, but here's a master link assembly. So these do require a special tool. You have to rivet the master links on the chain, and that's true for all the high horsepower rings themselves or chains themselves. But this is the chain that I use, and I'll show you a couple others here in a minute. But let me just stop for a second. This chain, with my solid sprockets and such that I've talked about, I have zero issues. In fact, I have almost zero stretch. I can put the chain on and I can run the chain pretty much as much as I want, to be honest with you. And you know, I would imagine I could run it half a year, most of a season. For me, that's pushing it. I don't do that. I, just out of preventative maintenance, do replace my chain after race weekends, especially if they're a double header, that type of thing. I'll put a new chain on regardless of how good it looks, but I just do that out of maintenance reasons, okay? So anyway, that's the chain that I use exclusively. It works great. Now here's a 525 version of that same style chain. In fact, if I put these things side by side, they're in the wrapping, so you might not be able to see this, but here, hang on with me. Yeah, you kind of sort of see, but not really. The difference is there. So I'll show you some specs here in a minute. And here's an older one. This is a, not sure if they actually make this particular chain anymore. It's from RK again, but it's their XW. And different ratings on that. So let me go over here and let me show you this on my computer if you can see this. So again, you don't need to use RK chain. This is what I found to work great. But online you can look at a few specs here. So here's the 520 chain itself. You see you have a tensile strength of 9450 pounds. It's telling you suggested horsepower max of about 200. The weight of the chain, 3.92 pounds, right? You scroll down, you look at the 525. Again, these are all in the same style of chain. It tells you up to 220 horse. You add about a half a pound of weight in the chain itself. And then you go all the way down to the 530, and this is the one that I use. It shows a tensile strength, the max they have, it's 11,200 pounds. They say it's good up to 220 horse. You know, it's almost 5 pounds. So it's heavier than even the 525, again, rivet style and so on. Now, if you go online, which many of you do, of course, this is from RK. This shows, let me pan out here a bit. This shows all the different chains that they have, and with the specs for each of them, tensile strength, life wear, the weight of the chain, and so on. So that's a great place for you to go to look at your chains. Now this particular RK chain, the 530, I shop a lot online. I don't recall the exact price. They're not the cheapest out there, roughly $200, excuse me. 200, maybe, you know, a little more than that. So they're definitely on the higher end of the scale, but these are the chains that I highly recommend. Okay, so let's spend a couple minutes. What do I do to prepare a chain? How do I clean it? That type of thing. First, as I've talked, you need to use a rivet tool to actually install the chain. So this is what I use. There's quite a few brands out there, but this is what I use. This is a very nice universal little It's a press. It's a press. It helps you do the rivet assembly itself. Works very well. So I've been using this now for quite some time. And here you can see it's from looks like Motion Pro, I think it is. So that's what I use for the master link on the chain. Now, to fit the chain itself, you'll need to find the length that you need, right? And you'll have to grind off the face of, or the head here of the chain link that you're going to take off. So as an example, let's just say we were going to take off, if this was the link itself, you would take a disc grinder and you would grind this one portion flush, and then you would grind this other one flush, and that would allow you to remove the whole thing. Now if it's just one end of it, you only need to take one off, of course, right? Then you would use your tool. You would use your tool to actually remove the pins, and you would actually then be able to clean up the chain, get it ready for assembly with now your master link, okay? So here's one thing I do. So if you can kind of tell, so here's a brand new chain. It's in the wrapping. Factory, they put a ton of grease and goop grease, right, all over the chain to protect it. I actually take my brand new chain and I actually stretch it out on the floor with, obviously, you know, something to keep the floor clean. But I stretch it out on the floor, and in turn, I use kerosene. And so I have a big bottle of kerosene spray. I actually just spray the kerosene all over the chain itself, and then I use a cloth and I wipe down the chain thoroughly. Now, what am I doing? It's a brand new chain. I'm taking that nasty grease that the factory shipped it with off, and I'm doing that because in the race cars, we just scan back over here again, right? If you don't care about that, then that's up to you. But if you want to keep your race car nice and clean, you need to do that. If you don't, you're going to have grease and crap just scattered all over your engine bay there. So so that's what I do. I remove all the grease, the factory grease. I install the chain then clean and dry, and what I use to lubricate the chain, now you can use all kinds of stuff, but I use this Maxima chain wax, and this is what I've been using for quite some time. It does not make a mess, and it seems to lubricate the chain quite well, and I do that on all my chains now. So I'd get it on the car. Once I have it fully installed, I would rotate the chain around and I'd be spraying this wax on the chain itself for the first time out, right? Now, after your first run, you come back in and your chain's hot, which it will be. My normal step is I will take a cloth, just a cotton cloth. I will clean to the best I can the chain itself, whatever debris and such off the chain. Then, while the chain is hot, I will take that Maxima chain wax spray and I will spray the chain thoroughly to put the wax on when the chain is hot. Does that make sense? So again, the maintenance itself, after I run or after you have your runs, you typically will look at your chain as just standard procedure when you're doing a walkthrough in your car. I do that as well. I look for tension on the chain. I do a quick little inspection on how taut the chain is. I will rotate around as I'm cleaning it. I'll be looking for any imperfections if there is any obvious issue. and determine at that point if I think I need to do any new tension on the chain itself. So let me talk about the install itself. So, you know, the chain's clean. I use the turpentine to clean it. I install it. I use the Maxima chain wax to lubricate it. And at that point, the last step is to put the tension on the chain. So this is a topic I think a lot of racers have. Everybody has probably tried multiple different things. On bikes, when you think about a motorcycle, you know, they talk about, you know, a fair amount of play in your chain itself. I think the rationale behind that is, you know, you have a swing arm on the motorcycle itself. That chain with the motion ratio of the rear axle on the motorcycle is going to change quite a bit, and I believe that's why they like to have a fair amount of play in the chain. I don't do that. I remove practically all play. So when I install a brand new chain, I will tighten that chain up until there's very, very, very little play. So you can see here, I'm moving this right now, trying to hold the camera still. That's the play that's on this chain. Now this chain has been on the race car, I think 2 different test weekends already. And you can tell it's pretty tight. And I can tell you, after I've installed that, I did not have to do any additional tension adjustment with this particular chain I use, right? So I'm not telling you if that's right or wrong. That's what a few others have told me and what they do, and I've been doing that ever since. And I've had 0 issues doing that. So I actually take all the play out and have it relatively snug. With very, very little play, and that's the tension that I actually put on the install, okay? So chains and sprockets. You know, I hope some of what I shared is useful for you. If you're having trouble with throwing chains on your race car, misalignment issues maybe, you know, hopefully some of this helps you, right? But yeah, ever since I've made these changes a couple years back now to the right chain, to the solid hardened drive sprockets, I don't have any issues at all. Knock on wood again, but I have no issues at all. And you know, and again, I mentioned this earlier, this might be overkill, but preventative maintenance, I believe, is one very strong thing for a racer to do for reliability, right? Finishing races and so on. So I always change, I put a new chain on after every race weekend. And I just do that again out of just preventative maintenance reasons, nothing more than that. I feel it's a wise thing to do, but you know, that's up to you again. You could probably run your chain setup like this for many races and have no issues. But again, that's just me. So I hope this is useful. I hope you found a few tidbits of information that you can use in your racing program. And that's it for this piece. But before I drop really quickly, just to share a new video that will be coming out in about 2 weeks roughly, 2-3 weeks. We're going to be out on track, and we're going to be doing some I'll call it aero mapping. This has been an item on our list for quite some time, and I think you'll find this useful. It will be an interesting video, at least I think it will be, and so look forward for that. That will be in about, like I said, 2-3 weeks roughly. So that's it for now. And again, you know, if you haven't subscribed, come on, man, please consider doing so. I would appreciate that. And as some of you have done, share your thoughts in comments, video ideas, you know, whatever questions you may have. You know, I'll try to respond to as quick as I can, okay? That's it for now. Until later. Ciao. Bye.